What if, Tensura, Melting the Eternal Frost author, JackDaWeb on Wattpad. This story depicts an alternate timeline wherein Velzard attends Walpurgis after sensing Veldora's presence. She subsequently meets our protagonist and becomes interested in him after his display at the meeting. After thinking for a bit, she decides to move to Tempest and becomes a close ally of Rimuru. Rimuru and Velzard will sometimes be out of character, OOC, as it is unavoidable for this premise. Rimuru, our protagonist, will be more rational and have an actual spine. Velzard, she will not be as cold and ruthless as her canon counterpart. Since Velzard is missing significant characterization in the early parts of the series, the author decided to write his own interpretation of her personality based on the original light novel. I recommend at least having seen the second season of the anime, since the story picks up from that point. This fanfiction will follow the main story beats from the original light novel, though some arcs will be glossed over if there are very few changes to the canon events. Chapter 19. Misplaced Guardian. Rimuru's Pav Shimo was a peculiar monster, to say the least. Quiet, reserved, and intensely focused, she held a seriousness in combat that was rare even among her peers. I'd recognized her potential early on. Her sheer skill in battle and magic made her an ideal dungeon guardian, and I'd assigned her to the 30th floor, considering her low EP. What I hadn't fully anticipated was the intensity of her prowess and her almost frightening mastery over ice magic. She was a prodigy with a blade, completing Hikaru's brutal training in record time and even managing to best him in a duel once. Benimaru sharpened her tactical mind, Sue taught her the art of stealth, and even Shuna commented on Shimo's quick adaptation to their teachings. Despite her origins, she was adept at wielding magic independently, having taught herself the basics of fire magic, ice magic, and wind magic in under a month. Eventually, her natural affinity for ice magic took over, and she dedicated her training to it. When Velzard had once observed her practice, even she noted Shimo's impressive efficiency and chilling precision. Now, she stood ready on screen, surrounded by a raging snowstorm of her own making with an ice-coated blade in her hand. Her cold, calculating gaze was fixed on Team Lightspeed. The group shivered visibly, unprepared for the relentless cold that shredded the air around them. Her aura is leaking right through the screen, Hanada murmured, clearly impressed by Shimo's intensity. This may well be the first real obstacle they face, Gazel noted solemnly. With Team Lightspeed already down one member, they faced a true challenge. Her unique skill, near absolute zero, brought the air to a deadly chill, and her control over its sub-skills made her even more dangerous. Dampening creates an area of frigid air that softens the impact of nearly any attack and hinders the effects of other skills. Siphon allows the user to draw thermal energy from her surroundings to replenish herself. Temperature drop brings her surroundings to an icy state nearing absolute zero. A powerful blizzard raged around her, peppering the room with hail and covering it in slick ice. At the same time, 5 B-class ogres, who acted as her stealthy subordinates from Sue's Kurayami unit, lurked in the shadows, awaiting her command. She might be a bit much for this floor, I muttered, realizing that her prowess could place her on floors much lower than the 30th. Shimo met the gaze of each adventurer, her grip on her blade tightening as she lifted it into a stance that radiated pure lethal intent. Masayuki's group was visibly tense, nerves worn thin by the piercing cold and Shimo's chilling stare. Suddenly, she vanished in a blur of speed. Using shadow motion, she cast herself into the shadows as if she'd melded with them. Bernie's eyes widened as a split second later, Shimo reappeared and delivered a brutal kick to his face, sending him flying into a nearby ice pillar. Crash! A loud crash resonated as Bernie's body slammed against the pillar, shattering ice. His eyes rolled back, and he coughed up blood before dropping to the ground on all fours, struggling to regain his composure. Bernie! Jiwoo and Masayuki screamed, horror painted across their faces. Spitting blood, Bernie staggered back to his feet, his eyes dazed and body trembling. Still, he managed to ready his spear just in time to parry Shimo's sudden, ice-laced slash. I'm impressed you saw that coming, Shimo praised coldly before melting back into the shadows, her words as cutting as her blade. Bernie stumbled back a little but managed to stay balanced. TCH, you two, come closer. It won't be good if we're separated this far. I have a feeling there are more monsters here besides the Guardian, Bernie ordered the two, and they immediately obliged. He's sharp, I commented, impressed by Bernie's quick response. He'll need that level of awareness to have any hope here, Velzard mused, her eyes sparkling with excitement. This fight may prove too much for them, she added. Huh? You're saying that casually? Don't forget about our bet, I shot back, but she just laughed. I'm not worried. Besides, I feel you'll pull something clever if you win, she said smugly. Looks like I've been found out. He. Maybe, but let's see if Team Lightspeed can survive this round first, I replied with a grin, returning to the fight as Velzard chuckled in anticipation. Jiwoo and Masayuki bolted toward Bernie, dodging the relentless barrage of hail and icicle shards crashing down around them. The ground was a treacherous layer of frost, each step an uncertain gamble, while the blinding snowstorm obscured their vision. Just as they were closing the distance, an ice shard shot out from the blizzard and speared through Jiwoo's foot. Arg! Shit! She tumbled forward, landing painfully on the frozen ground. Jiwoo! Bernie and Masayuki cried, their voices strained with worry. Jiwoo grimaced but managed to grab hold of the icicle piercing her foot, yanking it out with a wince. Blood spattered briefly on the snow before the cold immediately congealed it, creating a rough, icy seal over her wound. She gritted her teeth, lifted her head, and then, spotting movement in the whiteout, cast a lightning spell toward her right. A streak of electricity tore through the air, illuminating the storm for a split second. The bolt found its mark, and a shadowy figure dissolved in a flash of light. Jiwoo let out a relieved breath, but as the afterimage faded, nothing was left but ice and snow. Did we get her? Masayuki whispered, his voice tense, but Jiwoo shook her head. No, that felt too easy. It was likely a clone, she said, her tone full of worry. Stay alert, Bernie commanded, rallying them. We're not alone here, he muttered, his voice barely audible through the sound of the harsh winds. Meanwhile, Shimo, concealed in the shadows behind several ice pillars, observed the group with a calculating gaze. She extended her hand in a silent command, and then slowly lowered it. Her ogres, lurking like predators behind the pillars, instantly tensed, awaiting her cue to attack. Looks like she's sending in her troops, Velzard noted, a slight grin on her face. Those guys are in for a world of trouble, I murmured, watching as 3 of the 5 ogres emerged from hiding, their eyes fixed on Masayuki's team. They charged forward, swords raised, while the other 2 circled around silently to flank them. The 3 teammates scrambled into defensive stances, Bernie and Jiwoo positioning themselves in front of Masayuki. Jiwoo conjured a shimmering barrier around them, but their opponents were relentless, the massive ogres barreling into them like forces of nature. Clang! Steel met steel, and the impact reverberated through the chamber as Bernie blocked a powerful swing, gritting his teeth against the ogre's raw strength. Jiwoo, her barrier flickering under the strain, held her ground with sheer determination. Masayuki stood behind them, clutching his weapon tightly, his face pale. And Masayuki-sama, get to cover, Jiwoo shouted, her voice taut with urgency. Masayuki hesitated, clenching his jaw. But I can't just leave you two, he attempted to retort but was immediately cut off. It's fine, just move, Bernie grunted, parrying a heavy blow from one of the ogres. The 3 of them were already strained, and the added pressure of protecting Masayuki made it a brutal 2 against 3. Bernie and Jiwoo's strength, bolstered by Masayuki's passive boost, barely allowed them to hold back the ogre's crushing attacks. But Shimo's strategy was coldly precise. From behind, the remaining 2 ogres closed in, their movements silent and calculated. They were about to get blindsided. If they don't act fast, they're done for, I muttered. Jiwoo's barrier shattered under a relentless assault, scattering fragments of glowing energy. The 3 ogres pressed forward, unrelenting. Bernie staggered under the combined force, his defenses weakening, while Jiwoo swung her weapon with desperate precision. Third-person Pav Masayuki forced himself to listen to his teammates' pleas, even as every instinct urged him to stay by their side. He gritted his teeth, turning to plunge into the whiteout. The snowstorm swallowed him almost immediately, leaving him in a world of biting wind and swirling snow. The cold seeped through his clothes, chilling him to the bone as he tried to navigate the blizzard. Each step felt heavier than the last, and he found himself fighting not only the storm but his own rising fear. Even so, his teammates still benefited from his skill's passive boost. Their attacks and defenses were heightened despite the distance. But as he stumbled through the relentless blizzard, Masayuki realized he was utterly exposed. Alone, unprotected. It was precisely what Shimo had been waiting for. From the moment they stepped onto this floor, the entire setup had been a calculated trap. Shimo had recognized his importance at a glance. Even without fully understanding his skill, she'd sensed something vital about him. It was an instinct honed from countless battles. She knew that his presence was tipping the scales in his teammates' favor, that with him near, Bernie and Jiwoo were stronger and faster. He might be timid, hesitant, or even terrified, but Shimo's intuition screamed at her that this was the true obstacle. Now, with him separated from the others, her plan was set to unfold. While his team struggled against her ogres, Shimo could close in on him without resistance. She slipped into the snowstorm like a shadow, moving with purpose, each step silent and precise. Masayuki shivered, pulling his cloak tighter around him as he pressed forward, glancing back every few seconds. The blizzard obscured everything behind him, and there was no sign of his teammates or the battle. Far behind, his friends were still locked in a desperate struggle. Shimo's subordinates pressed in, each swing of their weapons heavier, their attacks fiercer. It was only a matter of time. Shimo didn't even need to make the first move. If she chose to watch from a distance, this merciless blizzard would do the work for her, freezing him bit by bit. His teeth chattered as the thought took hold, panic rising in his chest. She watched from afar, her eyes narrowing as he struggled further into the snowstorm. Her strategy worked perfectly, her intellect made up for any disadvantage in magicules. Masayuki's pav shit, it's freezing, this snowstorm is relentless, I can barely see a few meters ahead. My limbs are starting to go numb, and my heart is slowing down with every freezing step. I can feel my temperature dropping below safe levels, and each breath feels like swallowing ice shards. Is this where I die? Alone, lost in a blizzard? Sure, this bracelet guarantees that I'll revive, but that just means I'll experience the edge of death without ever crossing it. And honestly, that might be even worse. The difficulty of this dungeon just spiked, didn't it? We'd been breezing through the floors, cutting down enemies like nothing. Bernie, Jinrai, Jiwoo. They seemed unstoppable, with me barely lifting a finger and just granting them my passive boost. But then we lost our first member, and everything took a nosedive. Now we're facing a guardian, and one who definitely shouldn't be this powerful on the 30th floor. After what felt like an eternity, I caught sight of the far wall, barely visible through the snowstorm. How long had I been walking? The cold's been numbing my senses, messing with my sense of time. The storm's intensity fades out here at the edge, so maybe I can rest a bit, or at least rethink my poor life choices. With every bit of strength, I trudged toward the wall, intending to lean against it and catch my breath. That's when I heard a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, yet cutting through the howling winds. Fury of the frost, icicle slash, the disembodied voice uttered calmly. My heart stuttered, and I whipped around, body rigid with dread. Slash. A burning sensation seared across my right arm, the force of it knocking me off balance. I stumbled, landing hard on the snow-covered ground. Arg! I screamed. The pain hit all at once, hot and piercing, followed by the numbing cold. I scanned my surroundings frantically, but there was nothing. There was no figure nor movement in sight, just snow and shadows. I raised my arm, terrified to see the damage. A long, jagged gash split the side of my arm, blood leaking out, only to freeze instantly in the frigid air. I held it tight, trying to breathe and keep from panicking. The blood loss slowed, but the pain was unreal. She attacked so fast I didn't even see her. I'm surprised you managed to keep your arm. I was aiming to sever it cleanly, her voice was closer now, low and deadly. But you turned just in time. Color me impressed, human. I froze, heart hammering as I looked up, unable to resist the pull of fear. Behind an icy pillar, a figure stepped into the dim, blue light cast by the glowing ice. It was the guardian herself, the Frost Kijin, Shimo. She emerged slowly, her silver hair tied in a high bun with two sleek black horns curling up from her head. Her eyes glowed an eerie, piercing blue, colder than any blizzard, holding no mercy in their depths. A delicate teal and white kimono wrapped her form, bound with a black belt at her waist, and a thick gray fur scarf draped around her shoulders, adding to her frosty aura. Snow and ice seemed to swirl around her, almost alive, bending at her slightest movement. Her blade rested on her shoulder, reflecting the light of the ice pillars in a harsh, crystalline glint. There wasn't a trace of blood on it, though I knew she'd just attacked. It was like the weapon itself was beyond such mundane things. Rimuru, what the hell were you thinking? She's way too powerful to be a boss on this floor. I must commend your party's tenacity in reaching me, she said, her voice as cold as the air around her. But this is where your journey ends. In an instant, she vanished. My heart raced, my breaths coming in rapid, terrified gasps as I scrambled backward, trying to get away, until I felt my back press up against the ice-cold pillar behind me. The numbing chill of it cut through me like a knife. Wait, slash. This time, pain bloomed across my chest, sharp and consuming. I gasped, feeling the sting tear through muscle and bone as her blade met its mark with terrifying precision. The world began to blur, vision fading at the edges. Through my haze, I saw her looming over me, face impassive, eyes like two frozen flames. Rest easy. The storm will take care of the rest. Rimuru's poor Masayuki couldn't even finish his sentence before Shimo struck. She cut straight through his supposed plot armor, bypassing the usual safety net of his skill. This kind of merciless efficiency showcases the sheer power Shimo brings to the table. The screen shifted away from Masayuki's lifeless form, returning to the rest of his group. I glanced at the onlookers. They were stunned but couldn't look away. As expected, the kids reacted the strongest, especially with the gore, though Kenya seemed more fascinated than horrified. I guess some boys just have a taste for intense stuff. He probably reads the more violent manga. It was a huge mistake on my part to put Shimo on this floor, and I'll need to fix it after this is over. She's way beyond the difficulty level for floor 30, and with her bound to grow even stronger, she'll need a higher placement. Still, a part of me can't help but feel bad for the group. My error essentially sealed my win for this bet. Sigh. I'll deal with that later. Looks like their greatest asset is out of the picture, I stated the obvious, and the others nodded gravely. Indeed. I suppose this is where Team Lightspeed's journey ends, Gazel said, sounding a bit wistful. I think he enjoyed watching them blaze through the earlier floors. Errol couldn't help but chuckle. Rimuru Dono, isn't this guardian far too powerful for this floor? Such a sudden jump in difficulty seems excessive, he remarked, looking at me expectantly, and I nodded, feeling the need to explain. Yeah, that's on me. I organized the guardians mostly by their magicule capacities, and Shimo's capacity isn't especially high. But I underestimated her skill set, I answered, scratching my head, feeling a bit sheepish. Hanada crossed her arms thoughtfully. Magicule count is only part of the equation. Combat experience and skills often matter more than raw magicules. Elmisia nodded in agreement. With how Shimo handled Masayuki, I'd guess she belongs closer to the 40th floor. What do you think, Rimuru-san? You're right. Shimo's combat prowess alone might qualify her for floor 60, even ignoring her magicule count, I admitted casually, which left everyone looking a little taken aback. For real? That would definitely make her a misplaced guardian, Gazel stammered, clearly thrown by the idea. The group returned to watching the fight, and I approached Velzard, who wore a knowing smile. I'll accept this as my loss, Rimu-kun, she said calmly. Aren't you upset that you lost because of my mistake? I asked, half worried. But she shook her head, surprising me. I understand why you made the error. Monsters are often ranked by their magicule count, so it's only natural, she replied with a serene smile. But still, I muttered, guilt gnawing at me. She was taking this too well. Don't think too much about it, Rimu-kun, she said softly. Besides, I look forward to seeing what you have in store for me over the next 3 days. She teased, causing my face to warm. Focus. Not the time for that. Turning back to the screen, we watched as Bernie and Jiwoo struggled against Shimo's subordinate ogres, weapons clashing in a frenzied dance of sword and spear. The ogres faded in and out of the shadows, disorienting them with surprise attacks and relentless blows. Without Masayuki's support, their coordination faltered, and they began to look more desperate with each clash. After a frantic exchange, Bernie managed to land a lethal hit on one of the ogres, finally bringing him down. It was only temporary, thanks to the dungeon's revival system, but it was a small victory. 1 down, 4 to go. Not to mention, Shimo herself was still lurking, waiting for her moment to strike. Her strategy was clear now. She wanted to let her ogres wear down Bernie and Jiwoo, draining their strength and morale. Even without Masayuki's boost, the two fighters were resilient enough to put up a fight, and Shimo wasn't about to let her guard down. She watched from a distance, hidden in the snowstorm, calculating every step. Smart. She's waiting for the right moment, letting them tire out first. She's letting her minions chip away at them, Velzard commented lightly. Exactly. Shimo's not just strong, but she's got a strategic mind, I replied. Hanada shifted, clearly a little unsettled. So, she's not only powerful but frighteningly intelligent, she muttered. We continued watching the chaotic clash between the 4 ogres and the 2 remaining members of Team Lightspeed. Jiwoo struck down another ogre with a lightning spell, cutting their numbers to 3. Bernie and Jiwoo exchanged a determined glance, clearly feeling a surge of hope with the odds shifting ever so slightly in their favor. To everyone's surprise, the snowstorm vanished without warning. The sudden clarity of the room made things visibly easier for the remaining 2 adventurers. The biting cold lessened, and their surroundings grew calm. Why'd she dispel the snowstorm? It gave her such an advantage, Hanada murmured, her eyes narrowing in confusion. Everyone watching seemed equally perplexed. Errol, tilting his head, voiced what was on everyone's mind. Perhaps she's running low on magicules? Rimuru did mention Shimo's magicule capacity isn't particularly high. That's not it, I replied. While Shimo's magicule count is low, she's incredibly efficient. She can sustain a storm like that for ages with almost no drain. Turning it off doesn't add up. I was just as bewildered until Seal interjected. Report. Shimo is giving them a false sense of security. By ending the blizzard, she's making Bernie and Jiwoo think that Masayuki defeated her. They're exhausted from battling the ogres and likely desperate for reprieve. This tactic will catch them off guard easily. She's using psychological warfare now? She really is frightening. In the arena, the last ogre stumbled forward. The snowstorm. Shimo-sama's been killed. Gah! The ogre was cut off by Bernie's spear piercing through its chest. A glimmer of triumph sparked in Bernie's eyes as he called to his companion. Jiwoo, Masayuki-sama's done it. He's defeated her. This is our chance. His voice was breathless but elated, and Jiwoo's face broke into a weary grin. The two looked to the remaining ogres, who seemed to waver. Looks like we won, after all, Jiwoo declared, raising her sword in renewed confidence as she drove it into the heart of the next ogre. Only 1 ogre remained. From their perspective, victory seemed close, almost within their grasp. Yet, in the audience, Hanada glanced around in confusion. Did Shimo make a mistake? She's given up her biggest advantage, and now her allies are dropping. Velzard, watching intently, only smiled. Far from it. This is all part of her plan. As they reached the final ogre, Bernie and Jiwoo's exhaustion caught up to them. After a long, grueling clash, they managed to land the last blow, collapsing in relief as the ogre vanished into particles. They slumped to their knees, panting and laughing weakly. Ha! Ha! Itch! We did it! Jiwoo muttered, barely able to hold her weapon. Well yeah. Let's just wait here for Masayuki-sama, Bernie sighed, too exhausted to notice the shadows shifting around them. Oh, they really think they've won, don't they? Ice beam. Shimo's quiet voice echoed from the darkness. A thin beam of pure frost pierced through the air, instantly freezing Bernie's body into a block of solid ice. Jiwoo gasped in horror, staggering backward as her eyes darted wildly around the room. Bernie! She screamed, voice trembling as she lifted her weapon defensively. Then, the snowstorm resumed with renewed ferocity, filling the room with the same bone-chilling cold and blinding flurries. The wind was now so intense that Jiwoo could barely stand. She struggled to stay on her feet, but the blizzard's force overpowered her, knocking her to the floor. Shimo emerged from the shadows, a dark blur moving faster than Jiwoo's eye could follow. In a swift, brutal motion, Shimo shattered the ice block with a single punch, sending shards of ice and fragments of Bernie's body scattering across the floor. Jiwoo let out a broken, choked gasp, her face drained of all color. Her entire body shook with terror, her mind struggling to process the horror in front of her. Bernie had already respawned in the lobby, visibly shaken and haunted, his eyes wide with disbelief as his companions tried to console him. Now, Jiwoo was alone, utterly paralyzed by fear. Her weakened body trembled uncontrollably in the freezing cold as she finally seemed to accept her inevitable fate. Slowly, she closed her eyes. Thud. The broadcast cut out, returning us to the silence of the lobby. The spectators sat in stunned silence. Shimo's skill, precision, and chilling intelligence had left an indelible impression on everyone. I glanced around the room, spotting Caval's group, who had respawned at some point, watching with wide eyes and awe. Turning to Velzard, who wore a satisfied grin despite losing our bet, I couldn't help but share her amusement. "You might want to consider moving her to another floor, Rimuru Dono," Errol said with a playful glint in his eye. "Ha ha ha, I agree," Gazel said in earnest. Even though Masayuki's team was exceptional, that jump in difficulty was a bit much. "Yeah, I think Shimo would fit perfectly as the 50th floor guardian," I replied with a grin. The guests nodded in approval, though Hinata raised her hand with a curious look. "Quick question. Any chance she could get even stronger?" "Definitely. Shimo's still a Kijin, meaning she has room to evolve into an Oni under the right conditions." "That prospect is terrifying but hardly unexpected," Elmisia noted with a casual shrug. "With that, I suppose the dungeon's grand opening is concluded," I announced. "And tomorrow is the fighting tournament. The event everyone's been waiting for." The mention of the tournament sparked immediate anticipation. "I can't wait for my turn in the spotlight," Velzard chimed in smoothly, while I gave her a blank stare. "Just remember to hold back, all right?" I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose. Velzard chuckled, and I sighed, already anticipating the chaos she'd bring. After a few final remarks, we exited the labyrinth and I sent the guests to their rooms. Velzard and I headed home, taking in the vibrant nightlife of Tempest. Eventually, we reached our house and made our way upstairs. It felt a bit strange not to see Veldora lounging on the couch, engrossed in manga. He and his massive collection had now found a new home on the 100th floor of the dungeon. I guess that meant Velzard and I had the place all to ourselves. Once in my room, we changed into our sleeping clothes, turned off the lights, and lay down. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. First, there was the successful dungeon opening, then Shimo's display of prowess, and lastly, the unexpected bet I'd won by sheer luck. Thankfully, Velzard didn't seem upset. In fact, she looked excited. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," Velzard murmured softly. I turned to face her, momentarily entranced by her beauty, especially her blue eyes, which seemed to faintly glow in the darkness. "I'm sure you are. You should get some rest." "Good night, Vels-chan," I said, matching her soft tone. Leaning in, I gently kissed her on the forehead, then pulled back, surprised to see her maintain her composure with just the slightest blush and a soft smile. "Fu tilde good night, Rimu-kun," she replied just as gently, returning the gesture with a kiss on my cheek. Sigh. Seal the damn deal after the tournament, Rimuru. Thoughts of how to confess to her drifted through my mind. Maybe during one of our dates? No, it's too predictable. Or a vacation outside Tempest? It had potential, but I'd need to think it over more. With these thoughts swirling around, I slowly drifted off to sleep. Chapter 20. The Fighting Tournament. Third-person POV. Tempest's shining moment was the founding festival, which had been in full swing for the past few days. It was a grand spectacle showcasing the nation's rapid advancements, vibrant culture, and the beauty defining the city. Each passing day saw the event grow in magnitude, and the energy in the air was palpable as the festivities neared their grand conclusion. Through the festival, Tempest had defied every preconceived notion humanity had of it. Far from the brutal and war-torn civilization many imagined, the nation of monsters was a beacon of progress and unity. It was a place where differences were embraced, and diverse species coexisted under the guidance of a powerful yet benevolent leader, Rimuru Tempest, the Demon Lord. During these few days, visitors have seen a society growing at an unprecedented rate and thriving with innovation. More than just the festival itself, Rimuru's influence had subtly but profoundly altered the way humanity viewed the very concept of a demon lord. Once a title synonymous with fear and destruction, the term had started to take on new meaning. Rimuru, through his actions and leadership, had shown that a demon lord could be an agent of peace, coexistence, and prosperity. He had taken something humanity once saw as a threat and transformed it into a symbol of hope and a beacon for the future. What was once unimaginable had now become a reality. Humans and monsters celebrating together in harmony under the leadership of a demon lord was an event thought impossible by all. Humanity's previous view of demon lords as unreachable, tyrannical figures was beginning to erode, slowly but surely, thanks to Rimuru's ingenuity and unwavering vision. As the final day of the festival arrived, there was a quiet anticipation in the air. After days of festivities, parades, exhibitions, and performances, the festival's culmination had finally arrived. The Grand Tournament of Battle was a competition that promised to deliver an exciting spectacle. And if the rumors were true, the tournament would offer glimpses of the highest levels of power in the world. It would take place in the Colosseum, a structure that had become a symbol of Tempest's cultural and architectural achievements. The Colosseum was Tempest's latest marvel, drawing heavy inspiration from the ancient Roman Colosseum but infused with modern innovations. Its colossal structure was capable of holding over 75,000 spectators, and its design allowed for both massive public events and training exercises for warriors to hone their skills. It stood as a testament to Tempest's rapid growth and commitment to fostering peace and strength within the nation. But the true marvel was the protective barrier that Rimuru had prepared for the event. With Shub-Niggurath's skill nullification, dealing with any stray attacks or debris, the spectators would be protected from the chaos of the battles that were sure to ensue. It was the first of many ways Rimuru ensured the safety of his people and the guests who had come to witness the spectacle. The tournament would be a bracket-style competition, with 8 courageous fighters battling through increasingly difficult rounds until a victor emerged. The winner would then have the rare opportunity to challenge Rimuru himself, should they choose to accept the challenge. As for the audience, they would be treated to a spectacle unlike any other, one that would give them a glimpse of the true power of the gods. The final match would be an event for the ages. It was a battle between two of the most powerful beings in the world. On one side is the destroyer, Milam Nava, a being of boundless power and exuberance. On the other is the frost dragon, Velzard, a being whose cold demeanor and sheer might were as legendary as her frigid power. These two titans, each with a history of unimaginable feats, would face off before an eager and expectant crowd. It would be a battle between gods and an opportunity for the audience to witness the apex of power in this world. Rimuru's POV, today's the day everyone's been waiting for. But for me, it's the day I've been dreading. The first few fights might be entertaining, but the last one? Oh, that's going to be a nightmare of epic proportions. We're talking about a battle between two of the strongest people I know. The strongest dragonoid in history versus the strongest true dragon of today. Yeah, I'm going to need a whole lot of luck to survive this one. May God, or, in this case, Veldora, bless Tempest. If you're listening, I hope your daughter and sister don't go wild and wreck the whole place. Seriously, if they decide to get too serious, I might be forced to step in before Tempest is nothing more than a pile of rubble. I can already feel the headache forming. When push comes to shove, I'll have to use True Dragon Release with Veldora to keep them from flattening everything. Just the thought of having to interfere in their battle is enough to give anyone a nervous breakdown. But honestly, I'd rather face that than sit back and watch half of Tempest get obliterated by a bout between aunt and niece. Sigh. I pushed myself out of bed and immediately began getting dressed. Velzard was still sleeping peacefully beside me, wrapped up in the blankets like she had no care in the world. As usual, I decided not to wake her just yet. Instead, I pulled 2 mugs of coffee from my subspace, setting one on the nightstand for her. As I turned to leave the room, though, I heard the soft rustling of the blankets, followed by the creaking of the mattress. Good morning, Rimu-kun, Velzard greeted me, her voice thick with sleep. She rubbed her eyes lazily and gave me a tired but affectionate smile. Good morning, Vels-chan. How was your sleep? I asked, handing her the coffee, which she took gratefully with a soft hum of appreciation. Thank you, she replied, taking a sip and stretching her arms overhead with a smug grin. My sleep was quite nice, as usual. But I'm brimming with excitement today. I narrowed my eyes, knowing exactly what she meant. I know you are, I muttered, rolling my eyes. Tilda, are you worried? She teased, a mischievous glint in her eyes as she leaned back against the headboard, her smile widening. This woman was way too cheeky for her own good. No, definitely not, I said, dragging out the words with a sarcastic tone, crossing my arms dramatically. Her eyes sparkled, and she chuckled softly. Foo, Tilda, I almost forgot about that bet of ours. It was my loss, so, what is your first order for me, Rimu-sama? She asked with a playful, devious grin as she gave a mock bow. What the heck is she doing? She better stop that right now before I lose my mind. Oh, oi! We can discuss that after the tournament. And please don't call me that. I begged, my face flushing. But of course, she didn't listen. Instead, she smirked even more. I would like to start those 3 days as soon as possible. And besides, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. I want to see what you'll do, Rimuru-sama. I felt my cheeks heat up, and I quickly turned my head, trying to avoid looking at her. This woman always knows exactly how to get under my skin. I could only think of one thing for her to do during those 3 days, and to be honest, it was a little embarrassing. But hey, she lost the bet, right? Well, if you insist. I only have one request for you, Velz-chan, I said sheepishly, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, curious, her smile still in place but now with an air of expectancy. Tilda? Why is that, Rimuru-sama? She asked, inching closer to me, her face now dangerously close to mine. The tension between us was palpable as we locked eyes, and for a moment, all I could focus on was the warmth of her breath. I thought it wouldn't be fair to have you do whatever I say for 3 days straight, especially since I won the bet unfairly, I explained, doing my best to sound composed. My heart was pounding in my chest as I continued. So, I only have one request for you. I paused for effect. Her eyes lit up with interest, and she leaned in even closer. Crap, is this really happening? And what is your request, Rimuru-sama? She asked eagerly, her voice practically purring. Okay, here it goes. Do you have the skill, universal shapeshift? I asked, holding my breath as I waited for her response. Velzard pulled back slightly, blinking in surprise before she nodded. I do. It is an intrinsic skill to all true dragons. As I prepared for the next step, I felt a grin spread across my face. I see. Well, for my first and only order, I want you to grow elf-like ears and dress up as a maid for 3 days. I leaned back, folding my arms with a smug smile. The room went completely silent. Velzard stared at me, her expression unreadable for a few long moments. Then, her face slowly turned bright red, and she averted her gaze, clearly flustered. How cute of her. I wasn't going to force her to do it, of course. If she didn't want to, I would have backed off immediately. But for some reason, I couldn't help but enjoy teasing her a little. That's... She stammered, clearly at a loss for words, clutching her chest as if I'd just told her something scandalous. I couldn't hold back my laughter. Ha ha ha, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. I was just teasing you, Velz-chan. I assured her, but to my surprise, she shook her head firmly, her determination shining through her blush. No, I can do it, she declared, moving to the edge of the bed with surprising speed. Her face was still flushed, but she wasn't backing down now. She was set on fulfilling her end of the bargain. I leaned forward eagerly, watching her every move as she stood up and began to glow brightly, her body becoming a silhouette of radiant light. The transformation was swift, her shape morphing with ease as she changed into her desired form. When the light faded, I found myself momentarily speechless. Velzard had, well, changed. She was a bit taller, her features more striking, her figure somehow more refined. The most noticeable change was the pair of delicate elf-like ears peeking through her hair. And to top it all off, she wore a maid's dress in her signature colors of white and blue. She looked incredible. Whoa, I stuttered, almost unable to process the sight before me. I mean, damn, if this wasn't perfection, I didn't know what was. Velzard stood there, her expression a mix of smug satisfaction and a touch of embarrassment, and for once, I wasn't sure how to respond. This is rather embarrassing, Rimuru-sama, Velzard murmured, her voice soft yet laced with a hint of playfulness. Her cheeks were flushed a deep red, and it was impossible not to notice how her ears twitched as if they had a mind of their own. I couldn't help but become entranced by her new appearance. My gaze drifted over her. She was taller and more elegant, and her unmistakably cute elf ears peeked through her hair. I felt my own face heat up in response. Damn it, I'm supposed to be the one in control here. No matter what you wear, you'll look amazing, Velz-chan, I complimented her honestly. She shyly averted her gaze, her blush deepening. Would it be alright if I changed into something else for my battle later? Velzard asked, her tone polite and formal, though there was a softness to it that caught me off guard. Her sudden change in demeanor surprised me. I hadn't expected her to embrace the maid persona so fully. I only asked her to dress up for a bit of fun, but here she was, behaving more like a servant than I ever anticipated. Of course, Velz-chan. And please stop calling me that, I replied, my voice a bit sheepish as I scratched the back of my head. She responded with a graceful bow, her smile still hinting at mischief but now with an undeniable air of humility. Before I could process what was happening, she closed the distance between us, her arms gently wrapping around me in a soft embrace. My heart skipped a beat and I couldn't help but notice how her elf ears seemed to perk up, their tips glowing faintly as if reacting to the closeness between us. This was getting dangerous. A maid and an elf? What the hell was I even thinking when I made that request? My thoughts were in disarray, but I knew I had to stay calm. Control yourself, Rimuru. You asked for this. Just breathe. It's all in good fun. I look forward to being in your service, Rimu-kun, she teased with a playful tone, giving me another small bow that sent a rush of heat straight to my cheeks. I sighed, trying to compose myself, but it was clear that she was thoroughly enjoying my reaction. Velzard was practically glowing with amusement, and I had to remind myself that it was all part of the bet. Still, the sight of her in that maid outfit was something else. Now that we were ready, Velzard and I teleported to the Colosseum. As we arrived, I noticed the familiar buzz of energy that filled the air. The Colosseum was already packed, with tens of thousands of eager spectators waiting for the tournament to begin. I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread. Today's event was bound to be a spectacle, but not necessarily a peaceful one. We took our seats in the VIP area, the best spot in the house. My executives were already there, handling the preparations for the tournament, while the guests were getting settled into their seats. I looked around, my gaze falling on Veldora, who seemed to be the first to notice us. Yo! Good morning, Rimuru and Velzard. Veldora greeted us loudly but faltered mid-sentence, his eyes widening as they landed on his sister. Tilda? What's the matter, Veldora-kun? Velzard asked with her signature mischievous smile, which could strike fear into anyone who dared to cross her. Veldora, on the other hand, looked like he had seen a ghost. Nothing, Velzard nay. Veldora quickly denied, his voice cracking slightly as he stammered. Velzard's smile remained for a moment before returning to her more usual, composed expression. I had to stifle a chuckle as I watched their interactions. Despite the terrifying power they both wielded, their sibling dynamic was always oddly charming to witness. After a few more greetings, we settled into our seats, where I could already feel the tension building around us. The Colosseum was filling quickly, the seats packed with excited fans, all eager for the spectacle to begin. A few moments later, Soka took the stage as the announcer. Her voice rang out through the Colosseum, the crowd quieting in anticipation. I could see Diablo taking his place as the referee. While it was a bit of an unexpected role for him, it made sense. After all, who else could maintain order in an arena filled with powerful fighters? Third-person POV. After a brief pause, Soka's voice filled the stadium. With a calm yet confident demeanor, she introduced herself and formally opened the tournament, prompting a roar of applause from the eager crowd. As the clapping slowed, she recited the rules and introduced the combatants. Tournament rules. No combatant is permitted to kill their opponent. A referee will oversee all battles to ensure fairness and safety. Victory is determined by the combatant who has sustained the least damage by the match's end. If combatants feel they can no longer continue, they may surrender and concede victory. The 8 brave warriors and the first 4 matches, Gozel vs Mazul Masayuki vs Jinrai Gaia vs Gobta Geld vs Lion Mask. Once the rules were established, Soka gestured for the first match to begin. The combatants, Gozel and Mazul, stepped forward, both radiating an intense aura of rivalry. They were leaders of opposing factions, each representing a different race of monsters who had long been at odds. Their hatred for each other was palpable, and their first match was destined to be a fierce, no-holds-barred fight. Gozel vs Mazul Seal had suggested granting both fighters a unique skill to help balance the battle, but Rimuru declined. He wanted to see them fight without any outside assistance. It was purely a test of their natural abilities. The battle began with a sharp signal from Diablo, and almost immediately, the 2 combatants charged toward each other. The audience erupted in excitement as the sound of clashing weapons rang out. Gozel's spear met Mazul's with a resounding sound, the force of the impact sending shockwaves through the air. The two were locked in a brutal exchange, each attempting to outmatch the other. Gozel's superior strength allowed him to overpower Mazul momentarily, but the latter wasn't so easily defeated. With a swift move, Mazul performed a tactical retreat, narrowly dodging a thrust from Gozel's spear. He quickly distanced himself from his opponent, using the opportunity to strategize. Though he was stronger, Gozel wasn't as fast. Mazul's agility came into play as he adjusted his stance, preparing for his next strike. His spear came crashing down, but Gozel was ready to block. Or so he thought. Mazul's thrust was a feint, a deceptive move designed to mislead. Gozel's reflexes, slower than Mazul's, failed him. The spear slid into a gap in Gozel's defense, piercing him in a vital spot. The crowd gasped as the blow landed, and Gozel staggered back, a pained expression crossing his face. Diablo immediately declared the match over. Winner. Mazul. The crowd's reaction was mixed, with loud cheers from Mazul's supporters and an unmistakable undertone of disappointment from the Gozu tribe. Despite the loss, Gozel was quickly healed by Diablo, and the two fighters left the arena, their feud settled for now. Sokka returned to the stage, commenting on the fierce clash and moving the event along. The excitement in the arena grew once more as she introduced the next match. It was a fight between the legendary lightspeed hero, Masayuki, and his longtime party member, Jinrai. Masayuki versus Jinrai. The announcement was met with a thunderous roar from the audience, and the arena seemed to shake with the crowd's collective excitement. Masayuki, known for his incredible speed and agility, stood confidently, though his timid expression betrayed his nerves. On the opposite side, Jinrai appeared much more eager, practically bouncing on his feet as he readied himself. The two combatants moved toward the center of the arena, their weapons in hand, but there was no immediate rush to engage. The tension was palpable, but their movements were calm and deliberate. The audience leaned forward in anticipation, wondering who would make the first move. A few moments passed in stillness before Jinrai suddenly bent down, placing his weapon on the ground. The crowd fell silent, confused. Masayuki blinked, uncertain of what was happening. Then, with a deep bow, Jinrai raised his fist into the air. "I concede victory," he announced, his voice loud and clear. His declaration was so unexpected that it took the audience a moment to react. But when they did, their cheers were deafening, with even Jinrai joining to celebrate his own surrender. Masayuki, however, looked utterly dumbfounded, as if the events unfolding around him were beyond his comprehension. His shoulders sagged, and he sighed in resignation. Diablo nodded with approval, officially declaring Masayuki the winner. Jinrai, ever the good sport, offered his congratulations, and the two fighters left the arena together, their friendly rivalry evident to anyone watching. Winner, Masayuki. Rimuru's pav. That was so fucking stupid. Masayuki didn't even lift his sword to win that battle. I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief. The whole match had been a joke. Jinrai practically handed Masayuki the victory without even trying, and the audience cheered for it as if it were some grand display of honor. But it felt like a slap in the face of the tournament's spirit. Sigh. I know I have a cheat skill, but that is something else. I might have to seriously consider CL's suggestion of putting a permanent lock on that skill. Not deactivating it entirely, of course, but preventing it from evolving into an ultimate skill. Something about it just rubs me the wrong way. Report. Foo. Don't get smug with me. I said I'd only consider it. The crowd was still roaring with excitement, but the spectacle of Jinrai's concession was already fading into insignificance. Anyway, I suppose the next battle should be more interesting than this one. Gobta had better do something. I'm surprised he even entered this tournament, to be honest. Then again, knowing Hakuro, he probably forced him into it as part of his training. Gobta's opponent was some arrogant A-ranked adventurer named Gaia. From what I gathered, he has a big mouth but very little to back it up. Honestly, this should be amusing unless Gobta somehow finds a way to screw it up. I sighed and turned my attention to my beautiful maid. Of course, she was already looking at me, probably waiting for my thoughts on the last fight. "What did you think about that fight, Vels-chan?" I asked her, unable to hide the irritation in my voice. "Very underwhelming," she replied with that sharp, no-nonsense tone of hers. "But that is to be expected due to his skill," she added, her voice softening. I gave a slight, resigned nod. "Yeah, that wasn't even a fight, if I'm being honest." She agreed, her expression shifting slightly into a more thoughtful one. "Hopefully, The next one will be more interesting, she said. Third-person POV. As the cheers from the previous battle gradually faded, Sokka stepped forward again to announce the next match. The crowd fell into a hushed anticipation. To the surprise of many, Gobta, the unassuming hobgoblin of Tempest, was about to enter the arena. His opponent was none other than Gaia, a highly ranked A-class adventurer with a reputation for skill and arrogance. Gobta versus Gaia. The arena erupted in a wave of disbelief as Gobta stepped into the ring, his slim frame standing in stark contrast to his formidable opponent. His weapon was a simple, unadorned sword, which seemed almost laughable next to Gaia's gleaming armor. But the moment Gobta's eyes met the crowd, his usual cocky grin appeared. Then, the fight began with Diablo's sharp command, and in the blink of an eye, Gobta moved with surprising speed. Without warning, Gobta unsheathed his sword, and from its scabbard, a crackling bolt of black lightning shot out, tearing through the air. The surge of electricity struck the ground with explosive force, sending shockwaves that rattled the arena. The crowd gasped in shock. Gaia, caught off guard by the raw power of the strike, barely managed to leap backward as the lightning scorched the earth at his feet. The power behind the attack was enough to send a shockwave through the air, knocking him off balance and slamming him into the ground. For a moment, the arena was still, everyone waiting to see if Gaia could recover. He scrambled to his feet, his face contorted in frustration and fear. He had not expected such an attack from a creature that looked so deceptively weak. Realizing he was at a severe disadvantage, he quickly scanned the area, but Gobta was nowhere in sight. Then, from the shadows, Gobta appeared. The hobgoblin emerged behind Gaia with deadly silence, his sword raised high. Gaia spun around in time to see Gobta's shadowy figure, but it was too late. The attack was swift and precise, and Gobta's sword slashed across Gaia's back in a clean cut. The adventurer collapsed to the ground with a pained gasp. Everyone fell into stunned silence as Diablo swiftly declared the match over, confirming Gobta's victory. The crowd erupted into cheers. Their disbelief quickly turned into admiration. Gobta stood in the center of the arena, panting slightly, but his expression remained as cocky as ever. His eyes gleamed with triumph as he raised his sword in a small victory salute. Diablo approached Gaia's fallen form, using his powers to heal the adventurer before escorting him out. Winner! Gobta Rimuru's POV. Holy shit! That was unexpected. Gobta just pulled off shadow motion, again, just like he did when he faced off against Gabiru. But what really caught me off guard was the way he used his black lightning. It was way more potent than before. He's really getting the hang of his power. The case cannon worked so well in that fight, too. I'm honestly impressed. He's definitely leveled up, and Hikaru's training has clearly made an enormous difference. Kuahahaha. Such effective use of black lightning, sneaky and powerful. Veldora boomed, clearly enjoying the show. Indeed, Veldora-sama. Despite being one of the dumbest I've taught so far, he's among my best students, Hikaru added with a proud grin, his voice tinged with a surprising fondness. Ha ha ha. It's quite rare for you to praise the brat, Hikaru, Benimaru teased, chuckling as he nudged his teacher. Hikaru let out a chuckle of his own. He can be quite annoying sometimes, but his training is undoubtedly paying off. It's clear that even though Gobta might still have some growing to do in terms of his intelligence, his progress as a fighter is undeniable. He's still one of my weaker subordinates, but if he keeps going like this, I wouldn't be surprised if he reaches the level of a hazard or even a calamity-class monster. Foo tilde. Now that was entertaining. The fight was short, but the display was impressive, Velzard commented, clearly satisfied. Yup, and I'm sure the next fight will be even more entertaining, I replied. Tilde? Mind explaining why? She asked, tilting her head politely. I leaned in close to her, close enough to whisper in her ear. The temptation to nibble on those soft elf ears almost overwhelmed me. But I managed to keep my composure, barely. The one named Lion Mask is actually Carrion, a former demon lord. He might not be an awakened demon lord, but he's still incredibly powerful. Geld and my other top executives are all on the level of demon lord seeds, so this will definitely be a fight to watch, I whispered, watching as her eyes lit up. How exciting. Who do you think will win between them? Rimu-kun. I thought for a moment, tapping my chin. If this were before I obtained the true dragon egg, I'd say Carrion would most likely win. He's strong, even without being fully awakened. But since my subordinates grew in power after I got the egg, I'm leaning towards Geld winning. Velzard nodded thoughtfully, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. I see. It'll be an interesting fight, then. Third-person POV. The last fight of the first elimination round was about to begin, and the atmosphere was electric. Everyone had quieted as Sokka's voice rang out, announcing the two fighters. Geld and Lion Mask, the former Demon Lord, entered the arena with an air of silent intensity. Their eyes locked. There would be no holds barred in this fight. After a brief exchange of words, Diablo gave the signal, and the battle commenced. Geld versus Lion Mask. Despite their massive sizes, both fighters moved with terrifying speed, a blur of muscle and power. In less than 3 seconds, they collided in the center of the arena, their weapons clashing with a deafening crash. The shockwaves sent a ripple through the air, causing the crowd to recoil. Geld wielded his massive cleaver, Meat Crusher, its weight and power unmistakable. Across from him, Lion Mask gripped his halberd with expert precision. Both weapons were legend grade, though Meat Crusher was clearly the superior weapon in this fight. The two weapons locked in a brutal struggle for dominance. With a grunt of effort, Lion Mask unfurled his wings, using the burst of air to push himself back, distancing himself from Geld's blows. But Geld wasn't done. With a snarl, he charged forward, his weapon raised high, eyes fixed on his target. Lion Mask braced himself, preparing to meet Geld's blow with his halberd. But at the last moment, to Lion Mask's surprise, Geld struck the ground instead. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as the impact reverberated through the arena, sending a wave of force that rattled the spectators. The shockwave momentarily disoriented Lion Mask, and that split second was all Geld needed. With a roar, Geld lashed out with Meat Crusher, the cleaver slicing through the air and catching Lion Mask's arm. The blow was shallow but significant, the cut deep enough to make the former Demon Lord wince. However, thanks to self-regeneration, the attack wouldn't leave a permanent mark. Moments later, the injury healed, and the wound closed like it had never been there. He shot Geld a steely glare, the two measuring each other for the next phase of the fight. Realizing that his initial strength would not be enough, Lion Mask invoked his trump card, Royal Beast Form, a unique skill that transformed him into a massive chimera, embodying the traits of every beast type. His body grew larger, his muscles rippling with new strength, and his claws extended into deadly talons. The beat of his wings created gusts of wind that whipped through the battlefield. Geld, unfazed, steeled himself. While he lacked a transformation-type skill, his arsenal was far from ordinary. The combination of Gourmet and Guardian, two unique skills gifted to him by Rimuru, made him an unpredictable and versatile opponent. His offense and defense were a deadly mix, making him the perfect counter to Lion Mask's monstrous form. The two stood facing each other, the air crackling with tension. Lion Mask gathered his energy, preparing to unleash his ultimate attack, Beast Roar, a devastating blast that could tear through almost anything in its path. The tension in the Colosseum reached a fever pitch as the audience held its breath in anticipation. Without hesitation, Lion Mask released the blast, a wave of concentrated energy that tore through the air toward Geld. The spectators gasped, certain that this would be the end of the fight. But Geld remained calm, his eyes narrowed in focus. He didn't flinch. Instead, he activated predation and began absorbing the incoming energy. The blast, still potent, was slowly drawn into him. The consumption effect was strikingly similar to Rimuru's gluttony, though Geld couldn't absorb the full force of the attack, the majority of it was nullified. The portion of the blast that wasn't consumed continued toward him, but a multi-layer barrier flared to life, protecting him from the remaining energy. The barrier held firm, and the energy dissipated harmlessly upon impact. The crowd sat in stunned silence, eyes wide as they watched Geld stand completely unscathed. Lion Mask stood in disbelief. His powerful attack had been nullified before his very eyes. The move had nearly depleted his energy reserves, and his transformation began to fade. His monstrous form shrank, his wings retracted, and his strength evaporated. It was over. Lion Mask's shoulders slumped as he realized his defeat. With a heavy sigh, he conceded, his voice low but steady. I yield, he muttered. The crowd erupted in applause, the overwhelming display of strength and strategy leaving them in awe. Winner, Geld. The first elimination round was now complete. The remaining fighters, Mazul, Masayuki, Gobta, and Geld, stood ready for the next phase. They would be randomly paired, and only 2 would remain to battle for the championship. The intensity of the first round promised an exhilarating continuation, and the crowd could hardly wait. Rimuru's POV as expected of Geld, his performance was superb. One thing to note is that his unique skill, Gourmet, is strikingly similar to my former skill, Gluttony. It makes me quite curious about what it'll evolve into if it ever reaches the level of an ultimate skill. Maybe it'll evolve into something like Beelzebub now that I no longer have it. Or perhaps it'll become something new entirely. Such a splendid performance from Geld-san, Hakuro praised earnestly. I agree, and from the looks of it, he seems to possess a similar skill to your Gluttony, Rimuru-sama, Benimaru remarked thoughtfully. Oh yeah, they still don't know that my unique skill evolved twice. Yeah, if there's anyone most fitting to have a skill like that, it's Geld, I said proudly. I glanced around the Colosseum, feeling the electric buzz in the air. Everyone was eager to witness the next round. After a few minutes of deliberation, Soka walked back on stage to announce the next pair of battles. The crowd erupted in a fresh wave of cheers as she began her announcement with her usual flair. Second round bouts, Mazul vs Masayuki. Gobta vs Geld. Oh boy. Gobta vs Geld? There's no way that's fair at all. Geld is one of my strongest subordinates, and Gobta is. Well, he's Gobta. It's like a hydrogen bomb versus a small child. Unless Gobta has some kind of trick up his sleeve, he's definitely cooked. Fufufu tilde. The second match is quite hilarious, Velzard joked lightly, and I chuckled in response. Yeah, Gobta will be, hilariously, dead after, I replied playfully. Perhaps he has a plan of sorts, Hakuro chimed in, a teasing glint in his eyes. And now, for our first match. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mazul vs Masayuki, Soka announced enthusiastically. Her voice rose in pitch as the crowd cheered loudly. The roar for Masayuki's name was particularly deafening. Now then, let's see what ya got, Masayuki.